From classics to curiosity, and where melodies meet meaning. Welcome.
You've been doing this for years.
I understand how that goes.
That's funny. You just jump straight into the whole practice, Steve. Just no practice.
Exactly.
2
Right.
years of practice, but no practice, because when you hit the stage or real life,
Yeah.
whole new ballgame. All the practice either goes out the door or comes into play.
Yeah.
What happens today with all your practice?
Yeah.
Sounds
We
good.
might learn that you need to practice after this one.
A little bit more consistently. Well, I'm glad that we have Janet with us, and that's Janet Sung, artistic director at Meadow Mount School of the Arts. And I have a feeling, well, first of all, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. So glad to be
I have
here.
a feeling that you're, we're so glad to have you here. And I get the feeling that you're going to help us out just a little bit with some things relating to practice. I'm going to pick your brain for sure.
Okay. Sounds good.
Yeah, I do want to find out a little bit about your musical background, so I'm going to get to that. I think I want to start off with the school, Meadowmount. I'm pretty sure I heard about it first in the book, The Talent Code.
Oh, yeah.
A couple big sections on the school. Really piqued curiosity.
Yeah.
Actually, I read it, then I listened to it on audio again later, and jogged my memory on all that cool stuff that I had taken in. But there was a section in there about the school. Maybe you could kind of intro us about the school, because it's not traditional. I believe it's a summer program, right? Is that how it's set up?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you get, from what I've heard and read, is you get really amazing results. I'm trying to figure out how you'll tell us about the program, because 7 weeks doesn't seem like a long time, but somehow you're doing some amazing things there. So please tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So, my background as a violinist is I started, I was about 7, which funnily enough is considered for some a late start, but,
Really?
but I started when I was 7, and probably within a year or two, I was quite serious. One of my positions is the artistic director of the Meadowmount School of Music, which is a 7-week intensive program for string players, young string players. I'm also a violin professor at the DePaul University School of Music in Chicago. So it's sort of both of those institutions now are sort of where I do the bulk of my teaching and things like that when I'm not performing or doing like guest master classes or something like that.
Right.
So in regards to Meadowmount, it is a pretty unique program. It was started by a renowned violin pedagogue, Ivan Galamian, 81 years ago in 1944. His premise was he was a renowned teacher at the Juilliard School and the Curtis Institute of Music, which are for many years 2 of the top music conservatory programs in the U.S. And, he has like a sort of a who's list of famous violin students over the decades. And he started in 1944 because he wanted a place for his students during the year to be able to have an equally intensive environment where they could focus on their instrument during the summer, because the school was usually out. It was a 7-week program. And his idea was to basically provide an environment where there weren't any distractions, school, just life in general, things like that, where they could just fully focus and practice. And so first providing the environment, which is in upstate New York, in the beautiful Adirondacks. It's set in a place where there is no town or anything really nearby. If you want to go to town, you have to actually get in a car and drive about 10 or 15 minutes. So the immediate surroundings is just nature.
Gotcha.
So that's one of the things. The other things was just the structure of the program. There is a schedule that he had envisioned for the students. So they would have a certain number of hours of practice in the morning. So it's still the same pretty much today. It's 4 hours of practice in the morning, 10-minute break, and then an hour of practice in the afternoon. Of course, a lot of students do more than that, actually.
Right.
There's also rehearsals and things like that. But what it allows for each of those students is to be able to fully focus and have just time to really develop what they want to do in terms of their skills and their artistry.
And what do you hope the students take away from these lessons, like musically and personally? Is there a goal or a hope that you have when you have them for that short period of time?
Yeah, it's an amazing thing. There is a saying that we've got in Meadowmount, just because we have seen it happen time and time again. It's basically a year's worth of progress in 7 weeks.
Wow.
Okay. And it is amazing because when I was a student when I was 10 or 11 years old, which was kind of on the young end. I mean, even today, actually, the youngest on campus is 13. That's sort of where we kind of do the cutoff. But we do have younger students that may be living off campus with guardians or parents and things like that. So we do have younger students as well, and they're obviously very serious and very focused still already at that age. But I remember when I was a student myself, that there was a very different environment once you got there, right? And at the end of the summer, the skills that you acquired, they're things that you may have been told sometime during the summer, and then come August or come October, November, or January, February of the next year, you will start to still pull on all of those things that maybe at the time didn't fully resonate, but then because you just sort of had that in the back of your mind, then there's something that you realize, even several months later. I mean,
that's beautiful.
I think the focus of the practice is really where it changes. I know we were talking about the idea of talking about deep practice. I think that's where a lot of it is. I think because it's 7 weeks, it really allows the young musicians to come in and already have the opportunity to do the deep kind of practice. Right. So by the time they leave, it can, for different students, it's different things that they get at the end. For some, it's just like taking their technique, taking their understanding of musicality, interpretation, way to interpret music to another level, right? And so when you have students that come back year after year, we've had some students that come back for like 7 or 8 summers. They basically have called Meadowmount their summer home. And it's really like, I talked to a lot of alumni who, were there. Maybe they were there in the 60s, maybe they were there in the 80s, maybe they were there in the 90s. And they have talked about how they would go back like 6 or 7 summers, and it literally was where they grew up as musicians,
Wow.
And so they have that opportunity to like keep taking their skills to the next level. But for some, it's also if they're getting ready for auditions or getting ready for competition and international competition, it just allows them the space and the time to really, hone all of those things in their music and in their skills. So it really provides that opportunity. I think Ivan Galamian really hit on something.
Right.
And it's why it still exists and it works today.
Yeah, it's impressive.
So one of the things I'm thinking now, based on what you just mentioned, because that was 1944, you said?
Yes, when
you started it?
First, opened it.
Okay, so the first thing is we have to dive into what this intensive deep practice even is, but have things changed? Because from 1944 till now, a lot's changed in the world. Have the methods at the school remained the same, or have they kind of adopted to today's?
That's such a great question, because the school itself, pretty much the DNA of the school is so funny because we talk about the DNA of the school and you're exactly. But the premise, I think, has pretty much stayed the same. I think there even much of the campus looks very much the same. There have been things that have changed over the years. The concert hall, they had added air conditioning to the concert hall. You used to not have air conditioning. Just like practical things like that have changed. Right. But for the most part, the main ethos of the institution, the school, has remained the same. There are other things that have changed. There have been different faculty obviously over those decades.
Yeah.
Kind of music that we start to incorporate. I think that has changed, but I think in terms of just developing and providing a place for young musicians to really develop themselves as young artists. But also, I think even as humans, they learn so much just from that time in like discovering more about themselves, discovering more about their peers.
For sure.
I think that is also something that a lot of alumni and students take away from it.
Wow.
No, that makes. I mean, I can't even imagine.
I know there's so much, right? You're just trying to dig something out. So I have to mention this. So 7 weeks is the program, and you said that it's said that you get a year's growth in 7 weeks, and people come back continually. Is that a compound thing, or does it lesson after the third or fourth? Because I'm picturing in my mind, wow, you go 7 times, you're 7 years ahead of the game and you're playing. I don't know if it works necessarily that way, but is that kind of the way people seem to feel after repeat?
I think it's actually, it continues every summer that somebody comes back, and it's obviously what changes for them individually is different. At the beginning, they may have focused more on just developing more of their skills, like technique. Like we have a lot of the teachers will do technique classes too, in addition to just working on specific pieces of music. And so it allows them, the students, especially those that are at that stage, to really develop those things even more. And then for those that come later that have already built more of a stronger foundation in terms of their technique, then maybe they're developing other things, performance skills. Maybe in the first years, they didn't actually perform as much publicly. So we have different kinds of performances that are open to the public, performances that are closed in the sense that they are just for the campus, or even performances that are just for each studio or each teacher's class. Okay. So they'll sort of have different ways to perform, and they'll grow each time they do those kinds of performances. So maybe in a subsequent year, they have gotten to the point where they can be part of the public performances because they have now reached a different level in terms of who they are as young musicians.
Wow. Do you feel that, like, if we go back a couple years, when I was learning violin and piano, my teacher was a little bit more firmer, a little tougher. She could literally yell, maybe even beat me with her bow. It was like a lot more rougher. I appreciate
no wonder
it before it. But do you feel like the style, I don't know if you guys have seen Whiplash. I just watched that recently as well.
Yes,
and
I
like
have seen that,
the
yes.
teaching, when you're teaching someone that's talented, they tend to get a little bit more tougher. And I'm wondering, have you noticed a change in teaching styles? And I guess because you're dealing with kids, you tend to have to be. I was 10 when I learned, and she was not tender with me. But I'm wondering, have you noticed a softer approach to teaching over the last, like, say, 10 years?
I think in general, our society has
softened
in the sense that there are ways still to develop a young person without necessarily sort of the harsher ways to speak or to, you know, Yep. I think having said that, I think when a student understands it requires a serious commitment, they understand even if a teacher doesn't necessarily yell, there are still ways to communicate that in order to really get this work done, or in order for you to really develop and increase your abilities, that those things have to be done a certain way.
Absolutely.
So I think every teacher is also different.
For sure.
And even at Meadowmount, every teacher is different. It's like the approaches and the personalities. It's really, from my vantage point of just being the artistic director and sort of working closely with everybody, I see that very clearly, you know, but the students that come to work with those specific teachers know that, and so they are seeking that from that particular instructor as well.
Okay.
Well, that was a cool sound effect. Some device just shut off.
That was an exclamation point.
Yeah, right at the end of your point. So it's perfect to have a button. No, that's cool though. So I guess it makes sense. Every teacher will have their own unique style that kind of fits within the mold of the program.
Yeah.
I don't know if deep practice, it probably came from the book that I read that I mentioned, Talent Code, but could you describe what Meadow Mounts, and maybe it is a term that you use there, but what does deep practice look like? Like what is the pull that draws people in, that keeps them coming back, but how do they see this substantial growth in a 7-week program through practice?
Yeah, so Yo-Yo Ma is actually an alum as well. Yo-Yo Ma, Itzhak Perlman, Joshua Bell, James Ennis, Jesse Montgomery. I mean, these are just like a sampling of the many people that have come through, Meadowmount as the summer program. So he had mentioned something about there's something very necessary about a place like Meadowmount, because it really does allow the time. And that was a big thing with Galamine, is because we can be, as I think with anything, whether it's music, whether it's sports, whether it's, dance, whether, any of these art forms that require such a high level, or anything that requires such a high level of skill.
Yeah.
It just requires time.
Yes.
Right. To really spend with the craft of that thing that you're doing. Right.
Absolutely.
I make always in my teaching a lot of analogies to sports, because I think, in order to reach a high level of even any athletic endeavor, whether it's figure skating, basketball, swimming, gymnastics, any of these things, the amount of time and focus it requires is so necessary. There's no shortcut really to it, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's what people understand about Meadowmount, is they know that is a place where that it's set up in a way to provide that environment and opportunity for anybody who comes. I think that's already the first thing. So it provides the environment. The distractions are minimum, just because of the setting. But also, it's an amazing thing when you have so many other peers. When we have the practice session, or the practice session that is in the morning, it's from 8:30 to 12:30 every morning.
Yeah.
And it's built in a way that, there's a 10-minute break, so that there's time to reset and just like physically make sure everybody is staying, grounded and healthy.
Yeah.
But it is an amazing thing when you walk through the campus, just through the wooded paths, and you walk by all of the buildings. The students usually are practicing in their own room, because most everybody has their own room, or they have their own practice room assigned to them. Okay. And so when you walk through campus during that time, and you just hear music like from every window.
Yeah.
So it is, I think that in and of itself is motivation for students, because they just hear the students around them as they're practicing, that they are also doing the work, right? And then, of course, the concepts that they hear, and they hear a lot of the advanced students, and then there's a aspirational aspect as well, right? So I think because that environment is sort of the way it's set up for Meadowmount, I think that students, young musicians, sort of understand that and want to come back, because they know, wow, look at what I did that summer, and then want to continue that for them, with each successive summer too.
Oh.
Absolutely.
That's so
I have a couple.
Jump in. But I want to make a quick point, D.
Sure.
I don't know if you remember this. Our friend Sean Wilson, he's been on our show a couple times. He's a fantastic gospel musician. He has a really cool website, Sean Wilson Piano, where he teaches really ear training, but everything that goes with that. But he broke it down. He said the environment, as far as like learning music, he broke it down to these 3 things that I never forgot. the environment, the motivation, and the inspiration.
Yeah.
I think you touched on those almost in order when you were just talking there. So I was like, oh,
right.
okay.
Yeah.
He's
yeah.
onto something too. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah. I absolutely agree with all of that. Yeah. And I think
that. Oh, sorry.
Oh, I was just saying, I think that is what has allowed Meadowmount to continue in the way that it has, for these 80 some years, because there aren't that many places, I think, that sort of have that built into their program.
Yeah.
You have a lot of different festivals. I've been a part of a lot of different festivals myself, whether as a student or a performer or as a faculty artist. And they're all different kind of focus, which they should be, because then it provides a different experience, for any musician or young musician. But I think because of that, Meadowmount that is what it provides. People understand that in terms of a practice for students. But I think the other thing for them is not just the individual practice, but it's also there's a lot of chamber music that happens at Meadowmount as well. That has also been a long tradition, so it is also an opportunity for them to work closely with their peers and sort of build that trust and relationship and ways of learning how to communicate, through the instrument, but also even verbally. That is a skill that they have to learn and acquire. So it's really interesting to see some of the students that are sort of there for the first time. They're younger, maybe 13 or 14 years old, and then seeing how they communicate versus the ones that are like, 19, 20, 21, or even older, and how they communicate. So you really see, even within the students, how it can transform and change over the years.
I can only imagine. And speaking of transforming, I know both of you are teachers to some capacity, and I've always, and my brother, shout out to Andrew, he's also a teacher, and he's talked about how teaching has made him a better musician. And I'm also wondering, because you guys, and you specifically, Janet, are part of such a program that really hones in on practice, what's a practice session like for you? And Anthony, I'm also curious, as you as a teacher, what are your practice sessions like? And are they long? Are they short? Are you focused? Is it a reflection of some of the stuff you've learned that you practice individually, like on your own? I just was wondering if you guys could maybe elaborate on that. As
talk about like our personal practice sessions.
Yes. You
okay, gotcha.
Specifically, yeah.
That's why I'm here. I actually came to learn some things from Janet about her practice.
Okay. I wanted to learn something from you, Anthony. So. You want to go first?
I'm going to go first because you're going to blow me out the water, I'm sure.
No.
I'm just joking. I'll give one thing, and it's probably somehow going to fall into play into what you say, but one of the things that I still do and I focus on now is breaking things down. I've heard the term chunking. I don't know. I guess it came from somewhere.
Yes.
Yeah, just breaking it down into small chunks.
Yes.
Whether it's a passage of music that you're reading or, I don't know, a line from a song that you're learning by ear, is just breaking that down instead of learning the whole thing. Even if the whole thing is not the whole song, but like the whole thing is the whole verse, I would break that down into small pieces. And a practice session for me could be just repeating that same thing. For example, I play bass. I've been playing bass for a long time, but more recently I've been into piano, which is a whole new challenge for me because I don't have like the muscle memory and the automatic things happening. Even though I hear it in my head, it doesn't necessarily translate right away to my fingertips. Got I might just take the same, I don't know, let's say 4 chords, for example, just to simplify, and I might just play those in different paces for a while. So I might just be like, whole notes to kind of thing, and then quarter notes, and then maybe different rhythms, but the same chord progression, and then maybe I'll flip it. I read somewhere too that it's almost a good sign when you're playing it if someone couldn't recognize what you're playing because you're playing it so out of context, but you're playing that same thing, right? Okay. So I've been really just diving into that, and what I found is I've been learning a lot faster. I would still love to have a Meadow Mount in my life, but for my personal practice, that's one of the things that works for me.
That's so funny that you mentioned it, Anthony, because I talk to a lot of my colleagues that are my generation, and some of them I met when I was 11, 10, 11, 12, at Meadow Mount, and I'm still friends with them today. I mean, I think that's the other amazing thing about a place like that. And we all say the same thing. It's like, oh gosh, wouldn't you love a summer at Meadow Mount now?
Yeah, right.
Because we all, we are distracted by life most of the time. So that seems like such a luxury. I totally agree with I totally agree with a lot of what you said. I think like in my own personal practice, I guess it is kind of breaking or just doing smaller phrases. I mean, obviously you want to already know what you want the piece or the music to sound like, right?
Okay.
So you already have something in your ear. You already have something that's like fully realized in a way in your imagination, and in your ear. And so then what you're trying to do is to kind of work out all the kinks, right? So that you want everything to have such ease and fluidity so that when you're in that moment of performing, that you're not having to think about the technical aspects, right? Just because those things are sort of built in. It's already imprinted in your brain. It's imprinted in your muscle memory, in a way that you don't have to be micromanaging that, like in the moment when you're performing. When I talk to my students about this, it's the ultimate goal is to digest and to have enough time with something, a piece, so that when you are on stage, you allow yourself the most flexibility and freedom, because every performance is not going to be exactly the same, but you want to have that ability to really be more generous and actually open up what you've already worked on, rather than worrying about things. And I think, it's kind of an interesting thing, because when you're worrying or you're focusing on those things, even physically, you're a little bit different, right? You want to be actually physically the most free. It is hard to be relaxed actually in performing, in performance, right? So you're trying to find ways to really make those things possible in the moment of performance, right? So a lot of that is that, small section practicing. I love that you use the word chunking, Anthony, because I'm very familiar with that. And it's also, I think, doing it in small sections, or even doing it slow enough. That is another big tenet of practice, is you have to do deeply and very slow practice, right? So what it really ends up being is your brain is trying to absorb and really understand from all different angles in many different ways that thing that you're trying to do, right? And this is the analogy I also give to athletics. They will analyze. Why do they watch videos of themselves? Right. Because they are trying to analyze every single aspect of, if they're a swimmer, like what does their stroke look like? What is their pacing? What is their timing of the breath? How are their feet moving? How do they do the turn?
A lot of you are familiar with the DNA Project and have been rocking with us for a while, but some of you aren't. A lot of you are faithful listeners of the podcast, but aren't familiar with some of the other work that we do. So I just want to take a quick moment to explain to you a little bit more of what we do. So you're getting married, or you have a friend, a cousin, a sister, somebody you know is getting married. Okay. You've booked your venue, caterers, photographer, all that good stuff. When it comes to live music, most people have no idea where to look. We have you covered. Picture this. During the ceremony, while guests are being seated, or while the bride's walking down the aisle. During the cocktail hour, while guests are just mingling and having a good time. Don't forget about dinner music. That's very important to set the mood while guests eat. And we definitely can't forget the party. Let's get the party started right now with the DNA Project. www.thednaproject.ca for more information.
I mean, there's so many small micro aspects that they are trying to study so that they can give themselves that little extra edge, or really to develop something within their own physicality of how they do the thing that they're going to do, right? So I think it's very much, I mean, I often say we are athletes in a way. We are using our bodies, right? But we are also, there's obviously the the art part of it in terms of the expression, right?
Yeah.
The emotion, the expression. So we are still trying to train our bodies, though, I think, to be able to do the things that we're trying to do from a musical standpoint.
Well said. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, you got it from the best of the best. So that's great. That it really makes sense. Does that help? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. I like to learn from, what the best are doing, and I consider you two some of the best. So there you go.
I think the other thing for me is, and I see that even in different students, I think when they really start to learn and progress differently is when this is for musicians, obviously, is when they really start to develop their ear. So if they don't know what it is something is supposed to sound like, or the way the different colors that they can produce, or the clarity that they need, in that difficult passage, then they may not know actually how to progress or to practice even, right?
Right.
And so a large part, I think, is helping the students. And for me, it's the same too. Every time I listen to different music, or I listen to different performers, I'm sort of drawn into the detail and sort of the nuance of their playing, so that allows my ear to also develop more. I'm a big believer that, I'm a classical musician, but, regardless, you should listen to many, many different types of music.
Agreed.
Because composers were influenced by many, many different types of music themselves, right? Especially, as years go by. And so I think the more your ear starts to understand, develop more, then you as a performer, as a player, that becomes part of your own your own bank. Like what is in your own mind that you start to create in your own sound, or you're trying to develop, right? So I think those kinds of things go very much hand in hand with the actual physical, development as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Spot on.
That makes a lot of sense.
I know we're pressed for time. No, I want to go in on a lot more specifically.
Yeah, I know. So I think we'll have to do a part 2, if that's okay with you.
Oh, I'd love it. Yeah.
Continue, maybe dive a little deeper into some of these things. But yeah, it's been great. I guess trying to think of, and I want to hear more about your performance. So we definitely have to come back and talk about that a little bit more.
You have an incredible career, and you've gone to the greatest music schools.
You wear so many hats, so it's hard to narrow down and pick one.
We can talk about that too.
Yeah, that's a whole other thing too.
Right.
It is, yeah.
Trying to think of a good way to leave, because I know that we're all students of either life, music, business, whatever it is. So what's one of the things, and I think deep practice, the way that we described it, probably could be applied to most things. More of I would say, a conscious awareness of what you want to achieve and really breaking it down into smaller pieces and tackling it that way. But what's one of the things that you want your students to leave, whether it's the end of a session or the end of the term, with something that comes from you?
Yeah, there are obviously many things. I think for me, like, let's say if I've had a student for their undergrad, or, maybe their graduate student degree or something like that, right? I think my goal always with the student is to help them develop as much as they can. We hear this a lot, to help them develop as much as they can so that they can be as self-sufficient as possible.
Right.
That's often my goal, so obviously that covers a wide range of things, right?
Mm-hmm.
From physical technique to musical understanding, to being able to how to approach a new work, things like that I want them to be able to feel when they leave their time with me, that they have all of those tools as much as possible, so that they can continue even on their own to develop further, right? Even if I'm not around on that regular schedule anymore. But I think ultimately that is my goal for them in the time that they're with me.
That's a great goal.
Well, I'm going to say they're lucky and blessed, fortunate to have you.
Absolutely.
As a teacher, and probably a lot more a mentor. Ricky, I'm sorry that your violin teacher wasn't more like Janet, or else you'd probably be.
We should talk.
It's never too late, right?
I got trauma, yeah.
Anytime you want to start up again.
I think I might. I love the violin.
I'll pay your tuition. You can go to Meadow Mount.
Remember you said that it's legally binding.
Come visit for sure.
Maybe a visit. Yeah. Thanks so much, Janet. It's been fun. It's really been insightful as well. Like we've. All it's really done is made me want to ask you a lot more questions. So we're going to get off this, and we're going to set up a time where we can maybe a lot more space to just get into it.
Tell us about your origin story.
Yeah. Okay. I would love it. Yes. It's so great to see you both.
Yeah. Pleasure. Absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. Thank you all for listening. Stay blessed. No, I skipped something important. Just let people know, please, where they can find you, follow your journey. That's really important.
Right.
Okay. So, I do have a website, janetsung.com. It is still, it needed some extra work, so it might be down at the moment. But sometimes a quick Google search will do enough, and there's definitely ways. If they want to message me, if they have a question or anything like that, I'm at the DePaul University School of Music in Chicago. That website has my my work email, and they're all, very much welcome to reach out with that.
Awesome. Thanks again. And until next time, everyone, be kind to yourself and each other. As a podcaster, you know that great content is only half the battle. The other half is finding the right hosting platform to reach your audience. That's where Captivate comes in. With unlimited podcasts, advanced analytics, and personalized support, Captivate has everything you need to grow your audience and monetize your show. Join the thousands of successful podcasters just like us who trust Captivate for their hosting needs. Visit dnaairwaves.com/captivate today to start your free trial.